Hello, my name is Steve Rutkovitz, and I was an MSP for over 20 years. I actually had about 300 clients, about 40 employees, and I built a managed service business over about a 21-year period. During that time, I developed a repeatable process for security and compliance. I since sold my MSP to focus as a pure play on just security and compliance, helping MSPs around the world add security and compliance to their business. So cybersecurity, we have the expertise, we now have a proven process, we have a robust suite of products and services to really help you, the MSP, build onto your managed services recurring revenue. We're also proud to introduce Manuel Palachuk, our guest today, well-known consultant in strategy for MSPs, author of Getting to the Next Level, a blueprint for taking you and your business to the top. It's an all-in-one guide that, as a consultant, it's like really an all-in-one book that has really helped me as an MSP build my business. And I want to welcome Manny today, and he'll be a big part of this presentation today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Welcome aboard. All right, so topics today we're going to cover is how to increase revenue, security, and compliance, the importance of offering security and compliance services, the process and how it can be implemented, the right tools that you have to have in place to build your security and compliance business, and why strategy is important for the competitive advantage. And Manny's going to share with that today. So we're going to really focus on increasing monthly revenue, because when I talk to MSPs around the world, it's very important that they want to build recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is how they add value to their business, not just for now, but also when they have an exit strategy, down the road. And we have a lot of MSPs right now that are really doing well with security and compliance and building revenue. So let's take a look at where the MSP marketplace is today. And when you look at the MSP, this is the reality of where things are. As you know, things are going to the cloud. And I would say this is one of the fastest disruptions I've ever seen. I mean, this is a very fast pace to how things are going kind of from in-house into the cloud. I think we'll continue to see a lot of cloud evolution as time goes by. As things move into the cloud, we'll see more of a hybrid environment, and you'll see less and less servers in-house. And as people replace servers, they're going to be in the cloud. So we have to adapt to what's happening in the world. We're also seeing data sprawl. The amount of data is doubling every year, and we're seeing the actual client's data is just sprawling into all different directions, which is increasing the risk. And then we're seeing this thing called commoditization. MSP is a very mature business, and as businesses mature, they very often become commoditized, and it becomes very difficult to hold your margins, and it becomes difficult to make the margins we once made. So what are we going to do about it? So when you look at the future of the MSP, I really consider myself a visionary, and I like to look down the road, maybe even 5 years down the road. But what's coming fast and furious next is the Internet of Things. And I've seen a few numbers out, and it's talking about that 95% of all the devices will actually have a processor in there by 2020. And it's going to be a huge monitoring opportunity for you as an MSP, but there's also a lot of security and compliance issues that pop up with that as well. We're seeing big data. Data is doubling every year. And when I talk to clients, I'll say to them, what's your policy on data retention? And what they normally say is, well, it's really 7 years, but guess what? And they kind of lean over and whisper, we never delete anything. And I would say almost universally, nobody's deleting any data, which means if it's doubling and nobody's deleting it, the risk of all this data is just increasing, by the month. We're seeing the mobility, access to everything, anytime, anywhere, mobile devices. Again, the information's sprawling, so we have to be very conscious of what's happening in the mobile sector. And the cloud, I mean, it's going to keep moving fast and furious. I don't think we're going to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and we're going to just keep going more and more to the cloud. So the big trends forward are the ones we just discussed, and I think it's security and compliance is just going to get bigger and bigger as these other technologies unfold. So when you look at security compliance, let's look down the road of what some of the projections are. If you look at compliance alone, it's projected to be a $38 billion business by 2021. And cybersecurity, they just readjusted the calculations, but it's expected to be a trillion with a T, $1 trillion business by 2021. That's a staggering number. So the question is, as an MSP, that's a pretty staggering number, $1 trillion. So how are you going to get a piece of that revenue stream? How are you going to increase your revenue to address it? How are you going to differentiate yourself with security compliance to be able to brand yourself to get that business? And then how are you going to use that to get a competitive advantage? So when you look at security, we always look at it in defense layers. And when I talk to MSPs across the country and across the world, what I normally see is that most MSPs out there are providing what I call security 1.0. They have their firewall, could be a next-gen firewall. They have their AV, could be a robust, next-gen AV. They're doing patch management, somewhat proactive, and they're doing maybe some basic authentication. But there's a lot of layers that you can add to your customer's suite of products in addition to managed services that can, A, reduce the risk and risk of mitigation of a risk or a breach with your client and increase your revenue at the same time. And this is something I want to teach you how to do. But again, there's lots of layers that you can be adding to your clients around security and compliance. So when we look at compliances are growing at a very fast pace. In the beginning, it was just kind of medical and financial companies that had these compliances. Today, almost every business has some type of form of regulation, and it's important for you as an MSP to have the knowledge to be able to have the conversation with your clients around security and compliance. So the biggest thing we're seeing right now are state laws, and they're getting ratcheted up on like a yearly basis. But state laws, 49 of the 50 states have state PII laws. So what that means is if you have to protect your client's information. If you don't, the attorney generals of each state have teeth in which to fine for any type of breach. In some states, there's actually a wall of shame where your actual company name goes up on that website. And again, that'd be terrible for a brand, especially for like a law firm, but for any business. So the state PII laws and having that conversation with your clients to be able to protect the sensitive data is going to be very important going forward. Then you have federal laws. Federal laws are like HIPAA. That's managed by the Office of Civil Rights. There's several federal compliances that many of your customers have to meet. Then you have international compliances and best compliances, things like PCI, where the credit card companies got together and formed their own compliance. So as we move more and more into the security compliance world, it's going to be important for you as an MSP to be able to have these conversations with your clients. Now, if a customer of yours is worried about security or you think they need to be protected and they don't actually have a formal compliance of which to follow, then you can recommend a best practices. Best practices like an ISO 27001 is a best practice framework. NIST is probably the fastest growing framework in the country right now. That also, you could recommend a framework for your customers as well. Because right now, a lot of your customers are unstructured and kind of, in a way, winging it. But the framework, whether it's HIPAA, NIST, ISO, puts a structure around the framework, and it gives us a path of an organized way to provide security and compliance services. So with security and compliance, right now with the public breaches and the regulatory compliance, which have deadlines, the customer, your customers at a really high awareness right now. As a matter of fact, this is the highest awareness I've ever seen for security and compliance. It seems like when I first got in the computer business and PCs started coming out, nobody really wanted to talk about computers. I say, what business you in? I'd say the computers, and they didn't say anything. Once the PC got hot and mobile started coming out, no matter where I went, people wanted to talk about their PCs and ask me questions. Well, when I first started getting into security, people really didn't, they kind of looked the other way, didn't really ask a lot of questions, wasn't really interesting to them. Today, no matter where I go, people are asking about security and compliance and the Equifax breaches. So right now, it's just a heightened awareness. It's almost like the government and CNN's doing the marketing for us. So you want to kind of ride those coattails.
Okay, fantastic so far. Hey, Steve, this is where I got to ask you, why aren't they taking action on this right now? Because we know everybody out there knows that there's a lot of money in this, and they know that it's the most prominent thing in front of them. Why aren't they taking action? Why aren't they implementing and doing this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when I talk to a lot of MSPs, I actually ask this question, like, why aren't you doing it now? Or sometimes they'll tell me why they're not doing it now. But the first thing is, and probably the biggest, is a lack of process. So as a managed service provider, we really try to stay on process so we can keep repeating the process and scale. What I find when I talk to a lot of MSPs around the country is they tried it, they didn't really have a process in place, and didn't really have a repeatable process, and either gave up or didn't have a way to move forward to actually build security compliance. The first thing I would say is lack of process. The second is a lack of strategy, and that's where Manuel is going to help you today. But really, what's your plan to go to market? What's your product suite? What kind of employees are you going to train to actually provide these services? So I just see a lack of strategy. The third is a lack of robust suite of products and services. When I look at products for security compliance, it's almost like, drinking from a fire hose. Every day is another vendor saying, I'm the product for security compliance. You can't solve security compliance with a pinpoint solution. It's impossible. You have to build a suite of products, and they have to be robust. So I think that most MSPs have not developed a good, robust suite of products and services. I also talk to MSPs, and I'll ask them, well, how do you approach your clients today trying to sell security? And I'm seeing they're just having the wrong conversations. So they're selling security as if it's kind of a technical sale, and it's really not. When we ask and talk to customers about security, we want to talk about what assets they're trying to protect. How much is that data worth? Who's the asset owner? So you not only have to have the right conversation, you have to be talking to the right people. And we're trying to get in to see more C-level than anything else. We see a lot of MSPs will say, it's a heavy investment in personnel. I've got to go out and hire a security engineer. It could be $150,000, and I've got to have them on the bench before I get my first piece of business. So we're seeing a lot of times that the pushback is, what comes first, the cart or the horse? We have a way of helping you get into this business without making any investment and using your existing people. I also hear, no budget. I'm already getting $3,000 a month from my client, and I'm afraid to go to them and ask for any more money, because if I do, I could snap the cord. Well, I can tell you that I actually thought that in the beginning, but that's the furthest thing from the truth. If you can have a conversation helping them understand why they need security and compliance is going forward, you can bolt on and add a decent amount of money, maybe even double the amount of money around security compliance. Some MSPs I talk to say, look, I've just been too busy. I know I got to do it. I got to get there, but I've just been too busy. I can't get to the actual work I need to do right now. So they're just too busy. But the other big thing I see is just a lack of knowledge to uncover risk. So when you sell security and compliance and you approach your clients, you have to be able to uncover the risks of where they're at now. So when you look at risk, I can't emphasize, this is really the secret sauce that I want to share with you today, is we have developed a very, very robust risk assessment. And you can start providing this to your clients. This risk assessment really uncovers the gaps. So it kind of looks at a baseline of where your clients are at and looks at the gaps and the risks and the things that have to be addressed in order to button things up and bring them up to an acceptable level of risk. And it's very important that MSPs of the future are going to have to be good at identifying vulnerabilities and risks in their customers' networks. So when we focus on the risk assessment, we first started, we did free risk assessments. Well, I can tell you that our customers didn't value it. Today, we charge for a risk assessment. And I can tell you, if you use our formula for approaching clients to discuss risk assessments, not only will you be able to charge, but it'll actually become a profit center learning how to provide these risk assessments. And the risk assessment is really the pointy edge of the arrow. and it starts the whole process. So if you do a really good job with the risk assessment, and then you'll be able to do the rest of the process very successfully. So when you're solving the problem of security and compliance, it's not just a technology problem to solve. It's technology, it's people and training and having the right policies in place. And I call it the trifecta, the technology, training, and policies. If they're actually harmonized and put in properly, that is the right solution to help your customers mitigate the risk and solve security and compliance.
Okay, that's a very tight package that you've described so far. Can you elaborate a little bit on what's the process? How does this all work? What are the pieces?
Okay, thank you. I sure can. So the process that we've developed that is working very, very well, it's called assess, address, and maintain. And while it may be a little uncomfortable for MSPs to actually use this starting out, they have to kind of trust this process, because once you trust it, it really works phenomenally well. And again, it's assess, address, and maintain. Now, when you look at the assess, address, and maintain, if you look at it kind of broken down by revenue categories, the average assessment we do is about $15,000. And I'm going to explain more how we do that. But we do risk assessments for as low as $5,000, and we just bid on one for over $60,000. But the average is about $15,000. So that's the risk assessment. Then addressing the risk to bring your clients up to an acceptable level of risk creates a lot of projects. So one of the things I hear MSPs saying to me now is, when things go to the cloud, I don't have as many projects. So security compliance is like a compliance machine. I'm sorry, a project management machine. We are constantly able to develop new projects to do remediation and to provide all kinds of services to bring your clients up to acceptable level of risk. So after we do the risk assessment, it's anywhere from about $10,000 to $40,000 in just remediation services to bring your clients up to acceptable level of risk. And then the last is the maintain, which is everybody's favorite part, is the monthly recurring revenue. And that can be added to your regular managed services contract as low as $500, and as we've done them as high as about $4,000 a month added onto your managed services, depending on the customer, depending on the compliance, depending on the gaps that we find. So that's pretty much the categories you can fall into. So the first step is the assess. And the assessment, a lot of MSPs out there use products like, Rapid Fire Tools, good product, but only gives you about 15% of what you need. When we do a risk assessment, we do a passive scan, like a Rapid Fire Tools. We do an active scan. The active scan looks at it the way the hacker looks at it, both internally and externally. It's very, very clear on what the risks are and how the hackers see it. We do a PII scan. We're going to dig in and look at all the social security numbers, the credit cards, the date of births, the driver's license, the things that are finable breaches. So if you look at all the different compliances and learn it, the fines are based on per record of sensitive information. So why aren't MSPs pulling out the sensitive data? So if we know what the potential collateral damage is, then we can actually deal with it. We do a lot with dark web scans, with the Equifax breaches and all these different breaches. A lot of information, emails and passwords are already for sale out there on the web, and we now have tools that can scan and look for stolen data. So sometimes we're not just looking internally inside that network, we're not just looking externally, but we're also looking out in the dark web to see if your client's information's been stolen and if hackers have access to it. And there's really good tools out for that now. And the last piece is actually the control framework. So when we talked about the compliance and best practices, we want to try to implement a structured control framework in the assessment to help, almost like a TurboTax, ask questions and keep moving along a process to help us identify the gaps. Once we identify the gaps and the risks, then we present an executive summary to our clients. And it's in clear English, explaining to them the gaps, our findings, recommendations, and recommendations for ongoing maintenance and support, remediation. And we show them kind of a step-by-step plan. Sometimes they say, go for it, and just, want to do everything at once. And sometimes we're building projects for the year, just like a CIO. So I can tell you, if you do a good job on your risk assessment, your customers will move forward on the assessment 99% of the times. Maybe not all at once, but over a course of a year, they usually go with all your recommendations. So one of the things you're going to do is help your clients prioritize these recommendations, and we'll help you build those projects out. After you do the assess, then we do the address. So now we're going to actually start implementing and executing on those projects to bring your clients up to an acceptable level of risk. Lots of opportunities here, and it helps drive billable hours as well as different services. And they're very high services, high margin services. When we do security and compliance work, it's usually about 30 to 40% higher per hour than we do with regular IT services. So we help you kind of, get better margins as well. Now, when you look at the different types of projects, we have about 25 different categories that we actually have defined and actually vetted out products, which takes a lot of time to do. But it's everything from SIM, information, event management technology, huge. It's just roaring right now. Lots of opportunity around event management and logging. Once we identify where the sensitive data is, a lot of times we'll do drive encryption or email encryption. Could be advanced web filtering, but awareness training. So there's lots of different revenue streams you're not offering your customers right now that we'll show you how to do. Now, not every one of our clients get 25 layers of additional security or compliance, but based on our risk assessment, our findings, we're going to recommend the key ones that they need. And usually it's around 7, right? Like a 7-layer depth. So once we do the assess, then we do the address. The last step is, which every MSP's favorite, is the monthly recurring revenue. And I've also talked to a lot of MSPs, and they try to skip everything, go right to the monthly recurring revenue. And I got to caution against that. You really want to follow the process and trust the process. The assess, the address, the maintain is maintaining an acceptable level of risk ongoing so your customers don't fall back, because your systems are constantly changing, so you want to maintain an acceptable level of risk. And this is a huge opportunity. And the better you are at risk assessments, the more monthly recurring revenue you'll be able to justify with overwhelming evidence. So we've actually developed about 7 different recurring revenue models, and we actually have about 3 more on the drawing board. But one of the key ones we have is security as a service, which I'll explain more. We have vulnerability as a service, compliance as a service, dark web monitoring, credentials, so we know immediately if something's been breached, web monitoring, awareness training. And again, every single compliance has a risk assessment, and it talks about an annual risk assessment. So as soon as we're finished doing that risk assessment, we try to book it, 6 months or a year down the road. Just like you're at the dentist, you want to pencil it in, and the customer just kind of signs off on it. So when you look at the assess, address, and maintain process, it's a continuous loop, right? So you're constantly doing your risk assessments yearly, you're developing your projects, you're doing the maintain, you're always right-sizing security and compliance as your customers' networks and systems kind of evolve.
Well, okay, once again, so we've covered a whole bunch of stuff. The process, we've talked about the elements that you cover, but now, Steve, I think everybody wants to know what are the tools that you actually use to get this kind of stuff done.
Okay, so we use quite a few tools. We use about 6 different tools in our assessment process, about 25 different possible tools in our address process, and a lot of those tools are the same that go into the monthly recurring revenue. So I'm going to share with you a couple of tools that we use that are different than what most MSPs are using today, but I think will be very big in the future. So the first thing I'm going to show you is an active scanner. When I talk to MSPs around the country, it's probably about a 1 to 2% of the MSPs I talk to are using an active scanner. The reason is they really weren't designed for MSPs. They didn't have multi-tenant dashboards. You had to put out these big appliances to do it. But the active scan looks at the way an attacker looks at the system, both internally and externally. So if you notice here, it'll list out the actual vulnerabilities, and it'll do it by priority. And if you look at the last category here by risk, it's saying that if you fix these 15 vulnerabilities on these 3 assets, you'll reduce your risk by 40%. So if you look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 4 remediations here, and you do those remediations, you reduce your risk by almost 90%. So this is a really powerful tool that we can help you and your clients actually implement. And then once we understand how to mitigate the risk, we can turn this into a recurring vulnerabilities of scanning service. The second one I want to share with you, which a lot of MSPs are already using, but this is something that actually had input in developing with the original developers of the software. But this is the software that goes in and actually pulls out the PII, the sensitive data, the things that are findable, and then you can take that number, it gets calculated based on the Ponemon Institute's price or value per breach record and does a calculation. This one scan is actually a live scan that we had for an MSP and one of their clients who said they don't store any credit cards. And what we found out was that, yes, they don't store credit cards over the last 6 months, but for the last 19 years, they were taking credit cards. So these were like relics on one server. So when we scan the sensitive data inside of a network, we're seeing millions of dollars of potential breach, collateral damage that needs to be cleaned up, either deleted, archived, or encrypted. And there's a huge opportunity for you, the MSP, to start digging into the data. And I can tell you, if you show one of your clients a report like this, this is overwhelming evidence why they have to move forward. One of the hottest things we're doing right now is the dark web scans. We have some really good database technology that we're licensing that allow us to search by domain name, and it'll just start pulling up all the users and all the passwords. And you wouldn't believe how much information's out there. So I can just give an example. I could take somebody's email address, and if I know their password, I can go into their OWA or their Office 365, and boom, I'm right into their email. If I'm into their email, I start seeing other things, and this is what the hackers are seeing. This is why there's so many breaches. It's because there's so much information out there that your customers really don't even know about. So we want to bring their awareness to and help them understand what their risks really are. Now, the hottest service right now as far as recurring revenue is security as a service. Security as a service is something we built just like kind of managed services, where it's kind of security and compliance in one solution. So it has the basis of a SIEM, which is security information event technology. It also has global threat intelligence built in, where it's searching up against 40 of the community databases in the world. It also has the ability to look for changes in EXE and DLLs and abnormal behavior. And then we have kind of a SOC watching this 24/7. So this is how you as an MSP can start rolling this out to your customers without any additional staff and leverage the solutions that we're actually rolling out around security and compliance. And you can get really good margins because there's very little competition. And again, where there's mystery, there's margin. So this is a real good way to get additional revenue. So when you look at security and compliance strategy, when you look at security 1.0, if you're only providing security 1.0, you're really going to the ocean with a teaspoon. If you're not going out and really going after security 2.0 to increase your business by 50%, we really recommend going to security 2.0. And then if you add compliance to security 2.0, then you can probably increase your revenue by 75%. And if you take security 2.0 plus compliance and have a great strategy to be able to have that plan and also execution, I think you can increase your revenue or double your revenue by 100%. So with that, I want to take it back to Manuel, because Manuel is going to help you learn how to develop a strategy.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That's a lot of information. I think it's very well laid out. And the reason that you asked me to sit in on this and present a little bit of my content is because when we look at this, the chart that you've got up here right now, only the people that are going to have a really good strategy for their business are going to be able to get 100% utilization and do all of this stuff that you're talking about. Because it's no small feat to adopt these tools, put in place the processes, and then sell this to the customer. And everything you've said is you got the whole package. You can train everybody how to do this. If they want to learn how to do it on their own, it's no problem. You can do assessments for people. But really, a business that wants to get to the next level, they've got to have a strategy to implement this. Otherwise, they're going to come running to you and say, can you just scan this for me? And then one of these days, we'll take it in-house and take it on as an internal, an internal core competency. Well, I'm here to tell you what you want to do as an organization is, and this is a side conversation, right? Built inside of this presentation on cybersecurity and the tools you need, on how you need to develop a significant competitive advantage for your organization. And the way these tie in is this, is that when we say, first the question is, when I look at the landscape of competition that's out there in the world for me against all the forces that are working on my business, I have to defend my business against threats of new entries, other people coming in with new and better tools, which is why Steve's telling you, he's got the tools. All you got to do is learn how to do this, and you'll be the threat. Bargaining power of suppliers, people that supply the services and tools that you use to give your clients their content. Threats of substitution, basically somebody comes along with a better tool. Bargaining power of the customers, they're always either shopping around or saying, I can't afford that. And you've got to figure out very specifically where, how to protect your turf. And one of the things I like to say is, all you have to do is create a competitive advantage, or even better yet, I would prefer that you create a significant competitive advantage. Now, that's where the magic and the magic is, right? Is that competitive advantage. So what does that look like? A competitive advantage, first off, is when you do something better than anybody else in the field that you're in, or the game that you're playing, or whatever the competition is. And that basically means that you have a superior process, basically how you do things. Now, remember earlier in the conversation, Steve told you he's going to give you the whole process. He's going to show you exactly how to do that. That makes it easy. Unique or specialization of what you offer, basically the products and services that you offer up. We all know that's basically it's going vertical with a product line, or taking on a core competency, as I call it. Then the other thing is to go vertical in who you service, basically saying we're going to go very specifically towards medical or dental or whatever else. Now these things create your basic competitive advantage, but when you want a significant competitive advantage, you have to build the core competencies in all of these things that you've selected, and you have to do them consistently over time. And how do you do that? How do you say, okay, I want to adopt the tools, I want to adopt the processes, and I want to make it a core competency? And the answer is that you have to first develop your superior processes. Again, for cybersecurity, Steve's got the entire package. He's going to hand the whole thing to you, and you can bolt it on or plug it in, right? And everything else that goes around that, and every bit of it, what he gives you, if it's not exactly perfectly set for your business out of the box, you use this basic process I have laid out here, where you create a flow chart for whatever it is. He's got the methodology of assess, address, and maintain. But you've got to go and document how we do that, how we roll, how our MSP rolls this out. And then once it's documented, you refine it. And now you're on the road to creating superior processes throughout your organization. And you have to do that for every facet of your business: marketing, sales, finance, all of these things. Then the way that you create a specialized or a unique product or service is you focus on this thing where you can make just more money than anybody else can, because you've got these specialized processes and the tools and everything else in place. And what that basically means is you pick out, in the chart here, for example, we're here talking about it. We want you to move into the security as a vertical product offering, meaning that you specialize in it, that you do it better than anybody else because you've trained on it. And that means that, you get to cut out a piece of that financial pie, the per seat revenue for services in IT that we know is going to grow. That's what Steve was telling you earlier. That number is only going to get bigger per seat across the entire universe until computers are no longer used. Then you say, okay, how do we go vertical in the market? And it's very simple. You pick one or two, and you can slice the markets up any way you want. You say, look, we're going to go with veterinarians, we're going to go with banks, we're going to go with computer industries or manufacturing, and it doesn't matter. Keep them relatively close together or related to each other somewhat, but pick a few. Now, everything I've described so far is very narrowing, saying go vertical with the market, go vertical with your products and services. And I'm only referring to those who want to go stratospheric, who really want to head and shoulders be above everyone else in what they do. But unfortunately, It's not enough to have the processes and the uniquenesses of products and services and a uniqueness of market to get to that stratospheric level. It's also not enough to just simply have goals such as getting lead engineering certified for security penetration. That's an initiative, and that's what you do to get a core competency and take advantage of all these things that Steve has laid out for you. Selling more widgets, basically pushing harder and selling more. Again, that's what we call a tactic. It's a thing that you do, but it's still not strategy. Increasing customer satisfaction is another example. That helps drive service delivery, but it is not what's going to get you to the next level. And what I say is all of these little things that you do are required. They're part of your day-to-day operations, but they're what we call tactics. They're not actual strategy. And the difference is that tactics, these day-to-day things, they get you through the week, as I will say, but they don't get you to the next level. And that's what we want to do, is show you how to get to the next level and actually create strategy. So my secret, recipe, which really isn't so secret, is I look at it like there are 4 perspectives of any business: financial, customer, internal process, and learning and growth. And all you really have to do when you're building your strategy out, saying, what do we want this organization to be next week, next year, next month, or next month, next year, and in 5 years or 10 years? And you look at what you have to implement and put in place, and you say, for the finance, the money side of things, how do we, to look successful, what do we have to do? And obviously, usually it's bottom line revenue, recurring revenue, which is what we want you to have. For the customer side of it, what do we have to look like from the customers when they look at us? And the answer is typically, we have to be smart, we have to know what we're doing, we have to know how to take care of the equipment. Internal perspective, what do we have to do in our internal processes to get us to the next level? Where do we have to excel? Well, we just talked about that for the last 30 minutes, right, or more. If you want to be an expert in security, you do everything Steve tells you. You buy the box, you open it up, you bolt on everything, and you get very good at it in your internal perspective. And then the learning and growth perspective is, now we have to go, what do we have to do to take advantage of all of these new things? And the answer is, you have to have continuous learning in your organization as you move along. So when you think about these 4 perspectives, they're what keep the strategy that you develop, hopefully, in balance. Now, to put together your strategy, I have 3 segments of a pyramid. And the top segment is this thing we call culture. It's the vision, the mission, and the values and the human element of your organization. And so you set out and figure out basically the big vision. Where do we want to be? What would it look like if we succeeded at what we want to do in 3 years or 5 years? And then you set out the mission. You say, okay, well, we're going to become, our mission is to, eradicate cyber, security infiltrations across the globe. And you write that on stone and you put it on the wall. And then you decide what your values are for your organization, and the human element, that touchy-feely thing of, like, we like people that are a little bit geeky, but they can't be, too anal about what they do. They have to be able to talk to clients, things like that. And that's your culture. The next segment is this thing called the compass. And the compass is where you actually pick out those products and services that I mentioned earlier, where you say, these are the products and services we use to give great service to our customers, including the tools and things that we learned from Steve. The target market, these are the people we want to serve, and the operating systems are the tools, the QuickBooks and the PSA tool and the cybersecurity portal that Steve sets up for you, and those such things. And they have to be in order and defined. Then the last level, the last segment of the pyramid is this thing I call the blueprint for success. Once we've got all of these other things put together, in the blueprint for success, we lay out the resources. We've got some revenue over here. We have 18 able-bodied people over here, or we have 5. It doesn't matter however many. We set out our performance measures, those KPIs that say we're going to sign, whether it's sales, we're going to sign 1 new agreement every month. Whether it's service delivery, we're going to get a 5.0 on customer satisfaction. And then you lay out your roadmap and say, these are the initiatives that we're going to put forth to go and attack this market using these tools. These are the processes we're going to write up over the next few months. These are the people we're going to train. And it all comes, it starts to formulate a true strategy, not just meandering, right? So the framework I'm giving you is this thing I call this pyramid of purpose and value, where you say, if we want to be experts in cybersecurity, and we know that we can do a great thing in the world if we're good at what we do and we're successful at it over the next 3 or 5 years, all of a sudden you define this pyramid from the top down, everything on the pyramid from the top down. And then you go to work from the bottom up. Once your roadmap and strategy is laid out, you start executing on these initiatives that fulfill the learning and growth and the internal process of your organization to make your customers happy for that perspective, to make you money for the financial perspective. Now, the last thing I'll say is this roadmap and strategy, when it comes together, basically ends up being, it is literally a list of, imagine if you listed all the things that you needed to do to get to the next level. You can see this list I have on the left. Operation client focus, right? We're going to get all our clients on MSP. Client roadmap phase 3 to become a complete IT solution. Farther down the list, we have ITIL certification or HIPAA certification. All of these things are just initiatives that you know that you need to do in your organization to get to the next level. And if you look at taking Steve up on his offer and you say, we want to get great at security, you're going to find many initiatives that you can't all get done this business quarter that are going to have to be strewn out over the next few business quarters in some organized fashion. And that's what your roadmap is. It's that logical layout of what to do when and in what order to give the best offerings to your customers so that the financial perspective of your organization is healthy. And what's required there is the learning and growth and the internal process. Now, I know I've covered a whole lot in a short amount of time. The best part is all of this is in my book. And if you look at these slides afterwards, you can always come back and look at this. And I think a lot of you will get how this is at least a framework that you could follow and put together a better strategy than you probably put together before on your own. So real quick recap then, looks like this. Whoops, passed it up. The recap is this. Do your honest business assessment and validation. Basically, what do we want to be when we grow up? What do we want to sell and everything else? Define the culture of your organization. Set your compass, the products and services and the target market where you're headed. Develop your blueprint, basically lay it all out so it makes sense, and list the issues for the quarter. I call them the big rocks or initiatives for the quarter. And then set to discipline and execution and basically tick away at it. Go get the training you need, buy the tools you need, write the processes you need, and little by little, I promise you'll get to the next level. So I think that, Steve, we're back to you. You have some more to talk about on your side of the process.
To let you know that we have the process, the assess, address, and maintain, but I thought it was really important for Manuel to really explain what strategy is and how to go about it, because the stronger your strategy, the faster you can implement security, compliance, or any other services you want to go.
So where do we go from here, Steve?
So when you look at the choice cybersecurity difference, I mean, the security compliance can really help you increase the value of your company. It's going to help you increase recurring revenue. Out of the blue, when somebody came to buy a managed services business, they really looked at that recurring revenue piece. We want to help you kind of build that. You want to have that proven, structured process you can repeat over and over again, and you want to have a good solution to really protect your clients going forward. So we have several different partner programs. The most popular one that's really taken off is the risk assessment referral partner. There's actually no upfront fee to do this, and we help you. We do the risk assessments, Choice Cybersecurity. We got systems down in place. We can move through them very, very quickly, so we can partner with your client to do the risk assessments, and then we tee up the address and all the projects and recurring revenue that you get all the address and maintain. So that's the most popular program. We do have several different ones, but the referral program is just really taken off. We have MSPs we've been working with for less than a year. They've already done 12 projects, and they're just getting lots of projects and lots of recurring revenue. So everyone says to me, okay, Steve, what's the next step? How do I do this? Well, the next step is really contacting us for about a 30-minute kind of one-on-one meeting so we can get to know each other a little better, and I can understand how your business is set up, number of employees, who your target market is, any type of verticals. And then we say, you know what, just choose one client. Most MSPs I talk to right now have somebody asking them about either security or compliance, and they need a good process and strategy and suite of products to do it. Or it may be a client that you think should have this in place that we want to proactively approach. So let's really focus on one customer and really get the process down and use that as actually a training ground to actually provide security and compliance 2.0 services to one client. Then once we decide the client, then we create an action plan. What are we going to do to approach that client? How are we going to approach that client together or individually to get them to move on the risk assessment? And the last step is we're going to put together a risk assessment proposal. We're going to present it, close it, and then you're going to see that's going to really start the whole process, and the rest are going to fall in line like dominoes. So I want to open up questions for anyone, for myself or for Manuel. Fire away with any questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.
All right, so our first question today is, if you do a risk assessment at an existing client and you find vulnerabilities, will that jeopardize my relationship with my customer?
Yes, that's a pretty frequently asked question. So when we do a risk assessment, a lot of companies now have to do these risk assessments or compliance. So you're going to be in a much better position if you're recommending it, because if we do the risk assessment inside of one of your clients, we'll do the scans, we'll see the results. And if we see something that could jeopardize your relationship or put you under the bus, we'll come back to you and say, hey, fix this, this, and this. We'll do a rescan, and then we will present to the customer. So we're going to always have your back and make you look good. It's very important to understand that. If an outside company comes in, they're going to be looking for things that are wrong with your system. So you want to keep those outside competitors, even if you're just doing risk assessments or compliance, out of your customer's environment.
So Manuel, this might be a question for you. We have been in business for years and we have a mission statement, but we don't actually have a vision statement. And every time we try to come up with one, we just never finish it off. What can we do?
So that's a very common question, and the answer is always the same: is you have to keep trying is the first thing. But oddly enough, there are a lot of people that get paid a lot of money to go have retreats and take a group of people out and say, oh, we're going to come up with a vision statement for your organization. But what I say in my book is, somewhere along the way, you had an idea of why you went into a business to start with, and something that inspired you, that you said, gosh, you know what, man, I can do this better than everybody else. And it's not just about me making money, because I know that'll happen, but I think that I can do this thing if I'm successful at what I do. And you have to go find that internally. And it is hard to say that everybody that looks closely eventually will find their vision. It's just a matter of continuing to look. And I know that's kind of not really a direct answer, but I guess the key is don't give up, but look deeper and think, why are you doing this? And at some point you'll get inspired and say, I'm doing this because, I want to see the world turn in the right direction, or whatever else it is. And when you do, write it down and then take that to your leadership group and get started again.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's actually a bunch.
All right.
So the next question is, what if we want to do risk assessments ourselves?
Well, if you want to do risk assessments yourself, we do have a program to allow you to learn how to do it yourself. And about 1 out of 10 MSPs we signed up want to do it themselves. And we can talk about setting up an appointment to show you the whole process, how that works.
You stated earlier that you charge $35,000 for a risk assessment. Is that what you charge your partners?
No. So a risk doesn't cost $35,000. They start at about $5,000 depending on the scope of the work. And we've seen them go up as high as $60,000 for a very large medical practice, let's say 50 doctors. But we don't see that every day. So you have to right size that risk assessment. And you also got to keep it affordable, because if you can't get through the risk assessment, you can't get the address and maintain. So if we work with a partner, we actually either pay a commission or wholesale the risk assessment to the MSP, and they can actually white label it. So we can tell you more about how that works, but yeah, so that's actually the two options: white label or commission.
What is the minimum buy-in for a risk assessment partner?
So if you want to be a risk assessment partner, there is no upfront fee. If we talk for 30 minutes or so and we feel like we have a synergy, then we're actually going to help develop you and your MSP to learn this process, and there's no cost right now. And what I've originally I was bringing everybody in on a pretty, on a higher cost. And what I'm finding is that we can get moving pretty quick by just focusing on one customer. And all of a sudden, we're just on a roll. And then, the MSP thinks of 2 and 3 and 4. So we're willing to make that investment in you. But it's a two-way street. There's some work on your end, some work on our end to get things rolling. But if you want to learn how to do it yourself, there is an investment. But to become a risk assessment partner, there is no upfront fee.
Manuel?
Hey, I got a question.
Hmm?
Actually, I got a question. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Steve, so you've got a pretty robust training portal for folks that they can do all of this. They could take on this core competency and bring it in-house if they wanted. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what's the cost? I mean, what's the typical buy-in to bring you got 20 people on your team and you say, look, I got 5 or 6 top-level guys I want to run through there and get all the training. Where would they get started? How would they get started on that? If they knew that was part of their strategy and they wanted to go get in on that, where would they start?
Right. So we have several MSPs that do that, and we have a whole program for that. But what we're finding is with everybody's daily work, it's a pretty steep learning curve, and there's a lot of work on both ends. So what we're finding is that most MSPs want to get to that monthly recurring revenue as fast as possible. So by us doing the risk assessments, we can do them very quickly because we have a whole team just like surgeons just doing it over and over again. So we can get the MSP quicker to the address and maintain. But if they want to do it themselves, we can talk offline on a program and they can use our portal and services to do that.
But they've got to be serious and dedicated to put the time in, and their team's got to be on it. Otherwise, they're just wasting their money and your time.
Correct.
That cool. Okay.
So Manuel, I think we actually have another question for you. We tried several times to develop a real long-term business strategy, but every time we come up with something, it's either out of focus or we never follow through with it. What can we do differently?
Well, that's probably the biggest problem that most people have is they miss that thing that I had put like on my last follow-up slide. I say execution and discipline, and the discipline is to stay focused on what you say that you're going to go do, and then execute on it. And there's a really cool book by a couple guys named Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. And Larry Bossidy ran Allied Signal, a really big manufacturing company, and Ram Charan is this big world-renowned consultant. And they basically say you have to act your way into a new way of thinking. You're not going to just think your way into a new way of acting. You basically have, and the book is called Execution, and they basically tell you, look, if you're serious, you want to get to the next level, you got to go focus on what needs to be done and stop the procrastination. You have to learn to become an execution-minded company. And then the last thing I'll say is, if it comes down to it, you got to reach out for help, which is why I'm here. I'm a business coach. This is what I do, because there's nothing less than the future of your business on the line. If you can't do it yourself, reach out and get help from somebody else so you can.
Yeah, so Manuel, I want to talk about that for a second. So when I look back on my 21 years as a managed service provider, I actually started with one person and built it up to 40 people over 21 years. And I had different kind of milestones along the way where I wanted to get to the next level, and I kept getting pushed back and couldn't do it. I must have hired over the years, I was never afraid to hire consultants. I probably hired about 6 or so consultants. When I look back, they kind of taught me pieces. And then when I read your book, you actually showed the end-to-end solution. That's what I like so much about it. I mean, you had every part of the business covered, where most consultants are only really micro-focused on one area. And that's why I think I want to partner with you today, is because I've got a great security and compliance piece that every MSP can just hit it out of the park with. But unless they have a strategy and kind of someone helping them move along the process, and kind of as a coach and kind of keeping them on task, sometimes, it doesn't get done.
Well, yeah, they don't have the focus, they don't have the execution, and that's like anybody that wants to learn anything, martial arts, or you want to learn how to play golf, you go learn from somebody who's got experience doing that. You do what they tell you to, and you get that execution discipline. You get that execution mentality.
Yeah, let's do one more question. I think we have one more question we can do.
Are you installing agents on endpoints or some type of collector on site during the conductance of the risk assessment to gather all the information?
All right, that's another great question. So when I look at products, it's probably the best skill set that I have is looking at these products. When I look for a product, I don't look for myself. I'm looking for all the MSPs. And in order to make money in this business, you got to be able to scale. So to give you an example, the active scanner, which is just going phenomenally well, is a single agent that gets dropped into a network and it scans IP. So if you think the future is Internet of Things, we don't want to look for devices. We want to look for any IP that can be on the network. And then we can go in with one actual agent that can go in for the base, and then we can turn it into a monthly recurring revenue, just leaving the agent there. So the days of having to install agents and all kinds of boxes and appliances inside these networks are over. You can't scale that. I mean, there's companies out there with active scanners that have, or SIMs that have all these devices that have to be deployed. You can't scale it. So they're coming to us to help them figure out how to scale. So you need a single agent or thin agents that go on devices that are easy to deploy. You need a multi-tenant dashboard, and you need a way to be able to scale. So that's a very good question.
That is all of the questions that we have today.
Great. So I want to thank Manuel for being our guest today. It was very informative on security and compliance, and also helping us with the strategy. And I want to thank everyone. And any questions, or if you want to email Manuel or myself, you have the information right here. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hey, and thank you guys for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate helping support this thing. You got a product that I really believe in, and I think anybody wants to get to the next level. Man, security that is the vertical I would be in if I was doing this. I promise you that.
Great. Thanks again.